You can go.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to this amazing event we have set up for you. For this portion of our Multicultural Week and Diversity Celebration, we have Dr. Carlos Munoz Jr., professor at Cal Berkeley. Just a little bit about him in terms of his background. He's been a central figure in the struggles for civil and human rights and peace since he was a student activist in the 1960s. He played a prominent leadership role as a founder of the Mexican-American civil rights movement that became known as the Chicano Movement. Dr. Munoz has served as a leading organizer of various multicultural or multiracial coalitions, including the Faculty for Human Rights in Central America, Faculty Against Apartheid in South Africa, and the Rainbow Coalition. We are so excited to have him here. He's going to share some of his experiences as an activist, namely his experience in the East LA blowouts, or also known as the East LA walkouts. But before we get to him, we do have some words from Amparo Medina.
So thank you again for attending the Youth Identity and Power event, a part of the Multicultural Week and Diversity in Action series at our district, excuse me. As a college-sponsored event, please be aware that this event may address mature themes, and thank you for joining us today. Also, at the discretion of the hosts of this event, and in order to maintain a civil and courteous session, an individual may be removed from the session for disrespectful behavior, such as cyberbullying or post-harassing, discriminating, disruptive comments that are vulgar, profane, obscene, libelous, slanderous, or otherwise exhibiting behavior that presents a substantial disruption of the orderly operation of this event. Now that I've gotten that out of the way, so I'm super excited to have Professor Munoz here. You know, growing up and going to high school, I had no idea about Chicano history, none. Ethnic studies, nothing, right? And I went to Berkeley, and Professor Munoz was the first class, right? I learned about ethnic studies, and I could take these classes, and not only that, meet requirements. And I was introduced to information and knowledge that I had no idea existed, none. Like, with Professor Munoz, I learned about my identity. I learned about, you know, the history of Chicanos and you know, like learning about the Young Lords and, you know, all these different organizations. And so we are super excited. You know, I think this just goes to strengthen the need for ethnic studies, not just, you know, in the college system, but in high schools, right? So that way students start learning about their history. And expanding that knowledge, because there's so much to it, and it helps us find our identity. So again, we're super excited to have you here. We appreciate you taking the time, and I will turn it over to you. Go ahead, Professor Munoz.
Buenas tardes and good afternoon. I am very, very happy to be here, because anytime I get invited to speak in a community college, I always say yes, unless I'm out of town or out of the country, because I happen to be a graduate of community college. I got my AA at Los Angeles Community College, and it opened the doors for me to go on and eventually get my BA and my PhD. I never thought, however, as I was growing up, about college. I never knew about college. My parents didn't know about college. You know, poor immigrant workers from Mexico, all they had time to do is work and survive, you know. So neither one of them told me, I want you to go to college. What's college? Pues no sé. And so I never knew about it. And so at that time, and unfortunately, I think it still goes on somewhere in some places. At that time, there was unbeknownst to me, a very vulgar racist tracking system. If you were black or brown and a guy, you automatically got given a major of industrial arts, meaning wood shop, auto shop, and that kind of thing. Never any academic courses that prepare you for college, right? And I remember the very day, I'll never forget, when I graduated from middle school, or at that time, junior high school, we called it. I went to Belmont High where I was living, and the counselor asked me what my father did. And I said, well, he works with his hands in construction, you know, pico y chala. And so she says, oh, that's a very honorable profession. You should follow in his footsteps. So that day I went home, Pa, guess what? And he said, ¿Qué pasó, mijo? And I said, I'm going to follow your footsteps, you know, and work in construction. And he got angry. Carajo, he didn't know about college, right? But he didn't know, however, that if you graduated from high school, you could get a better job. So he told me, you go back and tell that lady that I don't want you to follow my footsteps. I want you to work with a pencil. Yeah, work with a pencil. Oh, okay. So I go back the next day, Senora, I didn't say Senora, she was white. I said, ma'am, my father doesn't want me to go follow his footsteps. He wants me to work with a pencil when I graduate. Oh, she said, okay, well, it makes it easy for her, right? She didn't tell me this, given that I got to give you an industrial arts major anyway. She says, I will, put you, give you the industrial arts major, and you will learn a lot of things that you could use as a pencil. So I started thinking about it. That doesn't make sense. And so I told her, is there another major that maybe prepares me better? And she said, oh, okay, how about a business major? Okay, cool. At that time, business majors were given to the girls. You know, they got home economics or business majors to prepare for cheap labor, for secretarial work, and that kind of thing. My first class was typing. And I went in there, puras muchachas, oh my God, I was so happy. I said, oh my God, these cute girls, and I'm the only guy, right? So I thought I was very lucky. I didn't complain about the major, right? So anyway, making a long story short, I didn't know it at the time, but when I wound up in the military during the Vietnam War, typing skills gave me a job in Army intelligence instead of giving me a job in the battle zones, So it helped out that way in long range. Anyway, so to go back to my educational background, so I went to community college after I graduated with honors, by the way, honors excluding academic courses. I got history, English, and I forget what the other one was. It was kind of academic, but I got B's and A's in there. Anyway, the point is that I went to community college, East LA College, and thinking, by the way, that wow, man, East LA, my home grounds, where I grew up in East LA, and I got there, puros gringuitos, gringuitas, man. Where's the Mexicans, man? Well, the Mexicans, a few that were there, were hiding out in the closet. They didn't want to come out as Mexicans, right? So I would ask him, hey, are you Chicano? What's that? He said, well, are you Mexican Americans? No, I'm Spanish. Oh, okay, I'm sorry, And so that was the kind of experience I made at the East LA College. But anyway, making a long story short, I took an algebra class. I never had algebra, so I took an. I didn't know that at the time that the algebra course I took was advanced algebra. So anyway, making a long story short, I almost flunked out and I got depressed. I said, well, maybe those white folks that think that we're intellectually inferior are correct. Maybe we don't have the brain power to do what we got to do in this kind of courses. So I dropped out. I got depressed. I dropped out, and I volunteer draft. I probably wouldn't have done it had I known that it was a time in the brink of the Vietnam War was going to start. So I didn't know that. And I volunteered draft until I go in the Army. So that was it. No more college for me until after I got out of the Army. Then I said, I'm going to give it another try, college, and I did. Of course, it was not that easy because it took me a lot of years to get my BA and first my AA and BA because I had to work. And so I worked in the daytime and I went to school at night. So I got very little sleep, but I did it. So I didn't get straight A's anymore, but I was happy. So anyway, I finally got, by the time I got transferred to, I was able to transfer to Cal LA for my BA. The Vietnam War, all of us who were veterans got the GI Bill to help our educational expenses, high college. And so that's why I was able to cut down working and get that GI Bill, and which I did. And in doing so, I had become already a member of the anti-war movement with other veterans who were opposed to the war. And so that was my first march, my first, as the activist thing when I was a student was going on the streets against the Vietnam War. And after that, I was elected to become president of the United Mexican American Students. And as president, I was asked by people in the barrio East LA for help. I was told by Sal Castro, one of the teachers that was supporting the students who wanted to walk out to protest the racism, segregation in the schools for Mexicans. And so I was invited to join the effort to organize the walkouts, and I became one of the organizers. And make a long story short, you can read about that, by the way, in my autobiography that I'm writing right now. And make a long story short, we pulled it off. We organized it, and we had 10,000 kids or more out of the schools in protest. And that was the first major protest that we didn't know about. It was the first one. It was the first one in the country that Mexican Americans had organized and marched, out on the streets, following the footsteps of the civil rights movement in the South. And so I was on my way, and then I started, getting more involved with politics in the community and play leadership roles and so forth. And then I finally realized that, well, you know what? What's going to happen now? What do I do next? And so we started talking about, well, you know what? We got to organize our own civil rights movement. Up to that point, I had become an ally of the Southern Civil Rights Movement with the Students for Coordinating Committee of the Civil Rights Movement, Black students. And also I was by that time helping Cesar Chavez out and Dolores Huerta, organizing food caravans to Delano and all that. So I was already on my way to become a full-time activist in a way. Pero la cosa fue que then March, I think it was March the 8th, actually. I remember it very distinctly. I take it back, April the 8th, because March was a walkouts. And a month later, I'm working on a research paper in my kitchen con mis calzones, it was a hot day. And I was writing my research paper on communism, international communism, right? I was taking a course on that. And so I hear some banging on the front door of my apartment. I think, well, but this type of the hour of the night, maybe one of my neighbors is in trouble. So I go to the front door and I open the door and bang, man, these guys, cops, with guns pointed at my head, threw me down the floor and started yelling things like, okay, where's your weapons? I said, my weapons? I left them behind in the army when I got out of the army, I don't have any weapons. And so then another cop goes to the kitchen. I'll never forget. He yells out, hey man, we got a goddamn communist, man. Look at, so I had books on my table, right? Written by Karl Marx, other communists, Trotsky, and so that was the proof that I was a communist, right? And I tried to explain, wait a minute, I'm a student, at that time I was a first-year graduate student. I'm studying this subject matter, they didn't believe me. Making a long story short, it was a very terrible night, a night of terrorism, and I was taken to prison. And I didn't know at that time there was 13 of us, but I thought I was the only one. But it turned out to be there were 13. Sal Castro got arrested, and so did a few others. And we found out from my attorney, ACLU, came to my defense, that we were up for 66 years in prison on the charges of conspiring to organize nonviolent student protests. Can you believe that? I could not believe that. Gee, wow! I said, this is a democracy, right? So anyway, I got thrown into jail in this prison cell with 4 other guys, and they were there for serious felonies like attempted murder, armed robbery, rape, drugs, and all that kind of stuff. And so there I am. I get thrown in there, and they'll look at me. They will, to compare notes, but this is what they did, got to compare notes. What are you here for? So I told them, organizing nonviolent student protest. They didn't believe me. This guy, you're a cop. You're here. You were put in here to get the goods on us. I said, no, man. If I were a cop, I would lie and tell them I did something like you did. So they didn't believe me. But that was a blessing in disguise, because being in there and trying to figure out how do I explain. I told them, I said, you know what? I got to write a book to explain to you why I'm here. And little did I know that particular remark and dialogue with the prisoners, my cellmates, made me realize that, you know what, I got to get a PhD, because at that time I was only working on my master's, and so I got to learn how to write a book, So I kept it in mind, and so when I finally was let out of prison on bail, I was out on bail for 2 years, and in those 2 years, I finished my PhD. So I might as well, I can't do anything. I was not allowed to be organizing anymore, or allowed to do all kinds of, quote, nonviolent activism. So I said, I might as well study for my PhD, and I did that. And so that helped out. I got it done. It took me 10 years approximately to get my BA. Working night and day and so forth, and for the PhD it only took me 2 years, because I took advantage of the time that I had nothing else to do except to study, right? And I got my PhD. So anyway, that was my story there, leading to the walkouts. Now, the walkouts, as I've written about elsewhere, were really we didn't know it at the time. We thought it was a local action. We're going to protest, racism, segregation, that kind of stuff. But we just want to be able to get the school district to hire Mexican teachers, staff, that can come in here and teach our kids knowledge about who they were, where they're from, who are they, for example. So that's all we thought about. But then later on, after the walkouts in '68, all kinds of other walkouts began to happen, because they were inspired by our efforts in East LA. And there were walkouts in Colorado, in Arizona, in Texas, in the next couple of years. And collectively, all these walkouts became the basis for the emergence of the Chicano Movement, or Mexican-American Civil Rights Movement, they were called Chicano Movement. And apart from the injustices that we were fighting against, we also had another goal, and that is that we have to do something about decolonizing our minds. In other words, as a colonized people, historically, the Spaniards colonized this and so forth, and here in this country, the Europeans also colonized Blacks and Latinos and other Asians. And so we got to begin to think about, how do we get the word out to our community, to our people, that we are descendants of indigenous people in Mexico. That those are our connections to the past. We have no business being called, at that time Spanish, and now it's Hispanic. We have no business being called that. We got to begin to call ourselves what we really are, and that is Mexicanos, Mexicans, and from Mexico, and from Mexico, Mexicano came the word Chicano that we were able to dramatize and call ourselves Chicanos and Chicanas. And so a bunch of wonderful, wonderful young women and men got together throughout the Southwest and came out to make this Chicano movement. So anyway, I'll stop there at that point. Maybe to Q&A, you can ask something about these events. But to go on and finish what I prepared to tell you about is that I want to try to give you a good idea about the differences between the society that I got to know in the 60s and the differences that you, young people today, are up against, okay? What I've learned in lifetime so far is that struggle is life and life is struggle. It doesn't stop. And then also, but however, I have learned in life that being involved in struggle and resistance is victorious in nature. It is a victory. We may not win the war, or win the whole enchilada, but we at least will make a dent on it. And at the same time, be able to survive and get stronger, because by virtue of the fact that we now will have knowledge about who we are and what we're all about, who our ancestors were. I, for example, did not know in my own family that in my mother's side, my maternal grandfather was one of the revolutionaries that made the 1910 Mexican Revolution. I didn't know that, my own grandfather, And so I didn't learn until recently, finishing my research on my family history from autobiography. And so a lot of people didn't know how that happened. I did not know that my parents, who came as immigrants, yes, but they actually really came as refugees from the Mexican Revolution, the violence, because at that time in history, the Mexican Revolution became the first most violent revolution in the world, okay? The next one that came about after that was 1917 Russia, the revolution there. Millions of people were killed, millions. And millions also ran across the border over here, this side of the border, to get away from that violence. And my parents were part of that, refugee group. They were children. My mother was about four years old. My father was about 6 years old. And they grew up as Chicanos in East LA. Well, in El Paso first, we went to El Paso, and that's where I was born, by the way, in El Segundo Barrio in El Paso. And I didn't get to East LA until I was 12 years old. So anyway, that was something that I did not know. So very important, that led directly into my decision to make a lifetime commitment to the development of Chicano studies, to the development of a university curriculum that would provide the knowledge necessary, not only to develop, decolonize our minds, but to do the research that is going to be useful and important to our communities for their liberation. So the vision that I had at that time was to not just be a typical academic. I was never a typical ivory tower academic that most of my colleagues are, unfortunately. Mostly white colleagues, but also nowadays you also got Latina colleagues the same way. They get into the mainstream, their careers become important, and they forget where they came from. And so that's one of the things that I taught my students, and Amparo probably remembers, and that is that never forget where you came from. After your education, it's not over. It continues, and it's important for all of us who get to the education to give back in different ways, not necessarily monetary, but if you happen to get a real good job, you can then donate, money to the community organizations that are fighting the struggle, but also in a different way. And one of those different ways is to be able to continue the educational process after college. It never ends, and also to understand and pass the word that getting an education is not in and of itself a goal. It's a goal toward another goal more important, So that's what I would always stress in my teachings, that if we are going to make a difference, we have to get out there and give back. If not monetarily or whatever, to get back in terms of time and commitment to organizing our communities to make them and put them in a better place, to give them their liberation, right, eventually. So that's just what I devoted my life to do. And I'm very proud of the fact that we were able to collectively, those of us that founded Chicano and Ethnic Studies, we were collectively able to produce a whole bunch of students, like Amparo, for example, and who have given back, who will go back where they came from, in quote, or not necessarily the same community, same barrio, but that you give back in terms of being participant at different levels of the struggle that goes on. And the thing that we have to stress today in your generation, that tell your parents, your parents want you to get a good job, and es lo más importante to help the familia, which is understandable. But by the same token, you have to realize, and they have to realize, that the struggle is también out there. Other familias are in trouble, and we have to take on a perspective that we are all in the same boat, not only in terms of our own communities, Mexican American, but other Latinos, Latinas, and also Black folks, and other people of color that are also in the same boat. So a lot of my time as an activist has been to organize, coalitions, specifically brown and Black coalitions. I became part of the Jesse Jackson, for example, Rainbow Coalition, and part of his presidential campaign back in the, I forget, 80s. I'm forgetting what the year it was. It's been a long time. But I've been doing things to that nature all the way. And I really feel that also another thing, my research that I have been able to do over the years is to document the existence of Africans in Mexico from the very beginning. African slaves were brought by the Spanish to Mexico, in particular through Veracruz, Mexico, and ever since 1521, it was when they were first brought, the African slaves, and they, they've been around since then. We have in our midst, or in Mexico's midst in particular, a bunch of Afro mestizos that have become known, African Mexicans or Mexican Africans, whatever we call them. And so I learned a lot of that and have been able to teach about that as well. One of the things that I did after I retired, I continued to teach but study abroad. I would take students to Mexico. Well, first I took them to Spain because I wanted to find out about why did the colonizer do what they did? What made the Spaniards want to conquer the Americas, And so that's what I thought about, and the colonizer had reasons for doing that, to expand their empire, of course. But then I said, well, 2 years in Spain was good enough. We found out about the enemy, end quote. Now we got to go back to Mexico and teach there and learn more of the history on site. It's good to read about it. It's good to see films about it, but to go there in person, I started to think would be quite a different educational experience. And I did that, and I really enjoyed it. My students had a good time, and I would take them to the places that they would talk about in class, where the history really happened, and stuff like that. We climbed pyramids, we did a lot of incredible things in Mexico, in all parts of Mexico that I taught in. So teaching to me has been very rewarding in more ways than one. And today I feel very blessed that I had a small role to play in making things and making changes in education, and also, in the real world out there. And I have no regrets. That I want to be very thankful to the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution that prevented the 13 of us that were indicted for conspiracy from serving 66 years in prison. If it was enough for the First Amendment, freedom of speech, I still be in prison today, fíjate. So ahí está. So this is why it's important today even to have a very strong commitment to freedom of speech. It's very important to continue that commitment on that score. So to go on, let me finish off. Now you get an idea of what kind of 60s, the historical period that it was. And we were able to, as a generation, do a lot of good stuff. We opened the doors to white institutions. At that time when I started college, my God, we were just practically invisible. Women in particular, casi nada, zero almost. And men, they were there because they were veterans like me, going to school in the college GI Bill. But now, my God, it's been an incredible change. We've opened the doors, and now we've got all thousands now of from some say maybe hundreds of Mexican Americans, Chicanos. In higher education. Now we got thousands. Now we have professors, in college teaching. We have teachers in the public schools teaching that we never had before. I never saw a Mexican teacher in elementary or junior or high school, fíjate. Never. In college, I had one professor, may he rest in peace, Ralph Guzman, who was from East LA like me, and I happened to be around navigating gangs. And his brother was in one of those gangs, and so I got to know him pretty well. But the point is that a lot of changes took place. And we got professionals, we got lawyers, all kinds of lawyers. Not enough, by the way. We happen to continue to be underrepresented in professions, particularly in the law professions, right? But one of the things that I'm most happy about is the progress that women have made. It's incredible. We now have Chicanas, Puerto Ricans, other Latinas, becoming very good political leaders out there in the Congress and in the state legislatures and politically and other professions. Incredible number of wonderful and very talented women in our midst. It's no longer a patriarchal heaven, in quote, that it used to be in my generation. Although, mind you, unfortunately, patriarchy continues to be alive. Not as well, but damn it, it's still alive. We got to stop that. Of course, all of you young men and women out there got to pay attention. And one of the things that I would tell guys that I grew up with, who were typical guys, and they only saw women for one reason, and I said, you know what? Did you ever think about your mother or your sister when you're doing these things? What do you mean? Hey, they're women. You're doing bad stuff to women, and to honor your mom and your sisters, don't do this stuff. They thought I was crazy. So anyway, I said, let me know. And so one of the things that I did also in my lifetime, which I never planned on doing, it becoming a single parent. My two oldest kids, we divorced, our mother and me, and she didn't want the kids, and so I said, okay, I'll take the kids. And so there they are. I was the only guy in town at that point in time. Well, it's changing now. That learned what women go through as single parents, the sacrifices they make. So anyway, a lot of those things happened that we were open our eyes to. Feminism emerged out of the Chicano movement. At first, of course, it emerged as a critique of patriarchy in the Chicano movement, understandably so. But in addition to that, it became its own, rich kind of tradition, not only honoring women, but to underscore the important role that women play historically and now. One of the things that I was brought out in my courses that spoke about social struggles and all that, I made it clear that women have always been playing a very important role. Okay, in Matenayuca, for example, like back in the 30s, a young Chicana who organized strikes in I forget which industry, but she was the first one that became very well known at that time in the 1900s, early 1900s, and there's been a whole bunch of women. My mom's mom, my grandmother, I mentioned to you that my maternal grandfather was one of the leading revolutionaries of the Mexican Revolution. Well, my mom's mom, my grandmother, was one of those women that also, joined the men in battle. That was Adelitas, they came to be known, And the song came out of the revolution, Si Adelita se fuera con otro. I don't know if you know that song, but you should find out about that song. But I mean, it's just underscoring the fact that, historically women have always been there. I've always said over time in my generation, I told, people that, hey, the backbone of our movement were women, because women have a different style than men that in terms of organizing. Las comadres, pass the word around. They are very good organizers behind the scenes. They're not hung up about getting recognition to be the leaders. You know what I mean? Men, unfortunately, have done that. Although there's less that do now, thank God. But so a lot of those things happened in my generation, and so we didn't have what your generation now has faced. A president like Trump, I mean, my worst nightmares. I've witnessed. I'm 81 years old, so I've seen a lot of presidents over in my lifetime, right? Bad ones mostly, but not as vulgarly racist and white supremacist and sexist as Trump. And so that came about during your generation. And unfortunately, your generation is stuck, and we are too. But your generation is stuck now with regard to what Trump did. People don't understand is how he has brought out of the closet all these white supremacists, vulgar, sexists, and who attacked the government on 6th of January, I believe it was, that was led to the death of 5 people. And I mean, never in my lifetime did I ever see anybody attacking, with guns and everything, the government's, headquarters, the House of the Congress. So that's how bad it has been. Now we got now Biden, okay, and one of the things that he said he wanted to do as president is get back to normal. With all due respect to Biden, yes, he's better off than Trump. I mean, he's a nicer guy, right? He doesn't tweet a bunch of asinine, racist, sexist things, right? But he's a politician. And one of the things I myself, my PhD is in political science, so I know a little bit about politics, right? But there's never been a time in history in our country where there's really been a significant difference between Democrats and Republicans. In the Chicano movement, we knew that, we learned that. So what we did to counter that is to organize our own political party. We called it La Raza Unida Party, to contrast what I call a two-party dictatorship of the Republicans and Democrats. And so getting back to the point today, what you're facing today in your generation is, we got a nicer guy, a non-tweeting guy, was president, but he's still committed to the same goals that the Republicans are committed, and that is the rich and not the poor. Okay, the government under the Democrats has also given rise to the poverty levels and given rise to the wealthy levels. There's more and more, not only are there millionaires now we got billionaires, and now we got trillionaires. Hijo de la chistosa. We got, a whole bunch of wealthy people that have been made better off from the politics of today's time. So that is something that you have to confront. And one of the things that I learned as a student is that we have the responsibility to do something about, racial injustice, to do something about, exploitation, economic exploitation, to do something about stopping war, for example. I've been a founding member ever since I served in the Vietnam War of what is called the organization Veterans for Peace. We call it Veterans for Peace, where we continue to speak out against the war. It continues to go on, regardless of whether it's Trump or Biden, or other people, other president. So we've got to stop the war. And one of my believe it or not, one of my heroes was Dwight Eisenhower. Do you all know who Dwight Eisenhower was? He was one of the presidents of the United States, and he was the commanding general in World War II of the Allied forces. Okay, and he became president, and he took on not only war, because he considered war a stupidity. Yeah, he considered war, unjust, whatever you want to call it. So he decided that he would oppose war as president, which he did, and also not only the war, but the corrupt economic system. He was far from being a socialist, but he was like an FDR. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was the only president up until then that I remember who had the audacity to challenge the corporate structure and to make reforms that were going to be good for the worker, like the right to organize unions, for example, and end child labor and things of that nature. So they're not revolutionary per se, but hey, you got to give them credit. They were the Democrats. But there's been some Democrats that have been okay, but at the same time, in terms of the policies, domestic policies and war policies, not too good. So we have to. Your generation now has to pick up where we left off. We set the tone.
I actually have a quick question from. We have a few questions actually that we would like to bring in.
Sure.
And I think this is the perfect time to ask this one. So you were talking about how this generation has its own set of challenges.
Yes.
So somebody in the audience actually asked, what do you think, and this is from Chris Hernandez, big shout out to Chris, Oxnard College student. He's asking, what do you think it would have been like for people of color or for a person of color if a Trump type president would have come to light in the 80s or 90s?
Mm-hmm. Good question. Good question. I think that it would have been different, but I think that it would be definitely similar. I think, for example, my generation, if we had had a Trump in office, would have had yet another target to take on, to include in the efforts that we were setting up to stop racial oppression and all the oppressions in our society. It would have added on. So I'm pretty sure we would have definitely done as much as we could. Our ranks were thinner back then. Now we got more. We got one of the things that inspires me today is the young people today. Young people, yeah, like our students here at this college, who are becoming, who are awake to the realities that are there, And we have kids in high school now. We have kids, not just to walk out like my generation kids did, but also in elementary school who are taking up global warming, I mean, they're doing incredible things of protesting today. All that has to be protested, and to speak truth to power. And so today, your generation today must have the commitment to speak truth to power. And I should add, what I always added, truth to the powerless, okay? You speak truth to the oppressor power, speak to the power, but you also speak to the oppressed, okay? Why? Because there's a lot of folks out there walking around, our own folks, with colonized minds, okay? Even though they're more vocal about things and all that, but they're still very much into the dominant ideology, dominant politics, and not really taking on full force things like we did in the 60s, protest today goes on, but not like it was. We had thousands all the time in the 60s, protesting stuff. And we have maybe hundreds now, unfortunately. Once in a while, just a big one. But I think what we need to do is to understand the responsibility that college students have today to provide leadership, to really get out there and find out what the problems are in your community. What's going on? What can we be helpful? And if you haven't got one on campus here, a MedChat that we had, Munoz in my generation, that became MedChat. I don't know if we have any more. I've seen, unfortunately, where I have traveled to speak a lecture, the total absence of Chicano organizations, you know what I mean? There's a lot more of our own kids in the fraternities and sororities, which is really unfortunate. I mean, I don't want to put those down. They got a role to play, and young people have a right to group themselves in terms of having fun and enjoying life and helping study and all that. But you know what? We got to get again the time when we can see more and more organizing going on campus, and using the on-campus programs as a means to launch a lot of organizing efforts in the community. So I really urge you all to do that, okay? And urge you to remind yourselves that education in and of itself is not the goal, not the end. It's a goal toward the end. To get educated, it means that you develop a critical consciousness of the realities that you're confronted with, okay? And that if we don't do anything now, your generation doesn't take the leadership and do something now, Mother Earth is going to really be hurting, very much so. As it is now, the exploitation of Mother Earth has gotten to the point that it's ridiculous, and the people who are suffering from them more directly are the Native American brothers and sisters that we have, whose lands are being, not only were they stolen initially, but the ones that were not stolen, they're being occupied by corporations that are exploiting those lands for purposes of profit. So there's so many issues out there, that are crying for leadership from the college educated young men and women that can follow the footsteps of those out there that are already doing it. So fear not to speak out. One of the positives of speaking out is that, hey, you're going to be recognized as a leader, and that's going to go a long ways to getting a better job in court, even, or being able to really recognize as an important woman or man eventually. But that it's just something that you can do. You can, that's how the old saying goes, you can kill two birds with one stone. If you get active in a cause for good, you become known for a cause that is going to be better for you in the context, and not because you want to do it for the reason. There should not be a self-interest in that regard. But the trade-off or the byproduct of being an activist on campus and off campus is that, hey, you know what? You're going to be more respected by people who may not agree with you even. Okay, and it'll take you a long ways. Trust me. And I've been speaking out ever since 1968 to the point that I still do today at my age. We don't think I can't do anymore like I used to be able to organize protests out there, you know. Ya estoy viejito, you know, and so I'm gonna have a little help to get here and there.
Well, Profe, your speaking out has definitely inspired a lot of people. In fact, you're blowing up the chats and the comments. So we actually have a few of them that we'd like to get through, if you don't mind. For example,
Let's do it.
Yeah, of course. So earlier,
20 more pages to go back.
maybe we can get through your autobiography by the time we're done. So we have someone earlier in the chat asked, so when you were arrested, was this during the Red Scare / McCarthyism?
Yes, it was after. But what it proved in my case in particular, that McCarthyism is still alive and well. Unfortunately, still alive and well today. McCarthyism made socialism a dirty word. And that continues to be true today. When there's bad things going on in society, oh, those damn socialists, you know, their problem, you know. And the reality is that there are very few socialists out there doing anything bad, or if any, you know, I don't know any socialists. And I happen to be, by the way, an independent socialist, meaning that I'm not a member of the Communist Party or any left organization per se, but I speak my mind, and I believe that socialism is humanitarianism. I mean, it's a system, economic system that's much more geared in the direction of the needs of human beings. I've always taught about the nature of capitalism as an economic system that exploits at the expense of human needs. And this is why I think socialism is a good thing. But again, at the same time, it's not the panacea. It's not the ideal thing to have happen. So, but I would welcome it if we could. But we have no choice but to deal with it within the capitalist system in a way that we can raise hell at the same time as be able to survive with a job or financially and all that kind of thing. So así está la vida. Pero I think though that again that was a good question, and I think that bear in mind that, like I said before, life is struggle and struggle is life. We're never going to get to a point, even your generation, I would argue, that you get to the point where, hey, everything is cool, man. There's nothing to struggle against. We got it made now. I got a nice house, and all that. I'm happy, My family's taken care of. My kids are in college, So what else is there? So unfortunately, but the point is that people have to realize, it's good that we do that. It's good that we can afford to buy a house now. If we didn't do it before, we got children and so forth. But hey, the struggle continues. Our people out there are still there where we used to be not too long ago. You know what I'm saying? So we got to keep that in mind.
Very important for us to continue that struggle. So in addition to questions, I do also want to make sure that we give you your flowers. For example, the vice president of Oxnard College, he pointed out, so excited to see Dr. Muñoz with us today. Youth, Identity, and Power was the first Chicano book I read as a college student. Thank you for making this possible. And that's our VP at Oxnard College. Also,
wonderful.
Have another professor, Dr. Jenny Luna. She teaches at Cal State Channel Islands.
Yes. She's one of my former students.
There you go. You're just going around sparking these minds. So she says, saludos to Profe Carlos Muñoz. From your former student, Jenny Luna, thank you for your lifetime of work, dedication, commitment to La Causa and education. Thank you for being here, speaking to Oxnard College and Ventura County. It's an honor to see you here and to carry on the legacy of Chicana studies. Other people, they're saying, speaking the truth of a colonized mind, that's profound. And we also have a question from a professor from Ventura College, Professor Gamboa. She would like to know, what do you think about the name change of Mecha?
Wow. Well, you know what? I've always thought that students have the right to call themselves what they want to do, what they want to call themselves in terms of a nomenclature of a name, as long as they know what they're doing and that their heart is in the right place. You know, I for example, don't agree with Latinx, and you know, why is that? Well, because the product of that term came from the intellectual circle, the small intellectual circle. They meant well. They wanted to just underscore the diversity that exists within us, within our Latino and Latinas, you know, Latin Americans and Mexicans. I understand that, but you know, the average folks out there don't understand that, you know. And if we want to help organize the community, organize the working class, organize the poor. I mean, we can't go around saying, "Hey, you're now a Latinx." You know, they know they're Mexicans or they're Nicaraguans or they're Central Americans. You know that that's what they know, and they're getting screwed over because of who they are. And so, no amount of name change is going to change that. You know what I mean? So, con todo respeto, I think it's important to keep that in mind. On the other hand, in terms of an organization and whatever they want to call themselves, and that's okay as long as their heart's in the right place. You know what I mean? I don't have any.
So in connection to that, we actually have another question from our VP. So he asks, how can we reclaim raza who voted against their own interest by voting for Trump in the last election? So this is kind of a two-part question. So
Right.
I think first, how do we reclaim those lost ones, I guess we can call them, and the hermanos perdidos, right? And secondly, how can we decolonize in a period with decreased ethnic studies and a lack of Chicano youth organizations? So the first one again, how do we get back those folks who voted for Trump against their own interests? And how do we decolonize when we have ethnic studies being decreased?
Yeah, it's going to be, it's a difficult chore. I mean, it's definitely a difficult job. I think that those we lost to Trump, thank God they were a minority. They weren't as many as they could have been. So that's, you know, and historically there's always been differences in our own communities. You know what I'm saying? We always had conservatives and liberals and in my criticism, not enough revolutionaries, you know, but we've had some of those too, thank God. But the point is that so it's kind of a lost cause in a way, you know, because those with the colonized minds depends on how colonized they are, you know. If they are the folks that voted for Trump who for some reason, you know, ignorance, I give them credit as ignorance as opposed to stupidity. They've been ignorant of the realities that man represented and who he was, you know. And so a lot of onda, you know, and no matter what you say to take on that particular you know, mindset of what Trump represented, it's not going to go far because they're all stuck on a particular paradigm of what they're a part of. They want to patriotic Americans, you know, the patriotic Americans. And the way with American flag, you know, and yeah, you got to vote for a Republican, a right-wing Republican, preferably, or you know, I don't want to use bad words in public here, but I mean, I got a whole bunch of them to apply to Trump, you know. Pero la cosa es que, yeah, so it's not worth it in many ways. I think that I would prefer to put my time and energy in those that are sort of like in the middle, you know what I mean? That they haven't decided and they can see the pros and the cons of the issue. Okay, those are the folks I think have a lot of possibility and potential to you know, be better citizens, you know. And not that I'm arguing for them to become Democrats, you know, per se. What I would like to see everybody become is independent. That's what I am, an independent voter, you know. And you know, if there's a progressive you know, Republican out there, sure. There was one back in the 60s, I forget his name offhand. He was a congressman who was very anti-war, and he was Republican, you know, and he was a pretty good guy. And at the same time, there's been Democrats from the Deep South in particular who have been so racist and so, you know, conservative, Democrats, right? So it's complicated, la cosa. But the idea is here is to spend your time and energy on those who are open to a discussion, to open pros and cons. Well, let's talk about this, Carlos. I mean, why do you think this? Right? This is what I think. Well, compare. No, well, okay, and then argue with that. Say, okay, well, and maybe take on the issue of whatever it's the issue it happens to be, and say, why do you think we have that issue? Because this is why. So that we need to have dialogue. We need to have intellectual dialogue. And but I mean by intellectual dialogue, not just academics. I'm saying we're talking about, as I prefer to see intellectuals. Intellectuals exist in the working class, One of my heroes was Antonio Gramsci, Italian communist. And he preached the fact that, it's intellectuals should not be confined to those who are intellectuals in the academy and the ivory tower. They're people. To me, to be intellectual, in other words, he would argue, is to have a critical mind that can see beyond the myths, that can see the realities, that can act on them. You see what I'm saying? That's being intellectual. It takes ideas to take on bad ideas, good ideas to take on bad ideas. You know what I'm saying? So you got to have that idea fight that translates into the real struggle in the grassroots that gets to the point where you have to get to. So that's how I see it in terms of that issue. But a good question.
Yeah, we have a lot of them, and we have so much love pouring in for you as well. For example, one of our student government members, Ashley Flores, pointed out, you just made me a fan of your work, Professor Munoz. And we've got another student who says, so they're asking you if you can repeat this line, okay? So they really liked when you said, education is not the goal itself. Can you say that one more time for the people, Profe?
Yeah, education is not the end in itself. It's not the goal. It's not the goal. Education is the goal to the end. I mean, you ended up with education, but you ended up changing things. Okay, if you're going to have an education, one way of giving back the education is to come up with fresh ideas and approaches to the existing resolutions of the problems, right? So that's how I see it. So this is why I like that particular. I haven't thought about being saying, but that's what my thoughts are. I've known, for example, as an example, I've known people that work in what do you call it? ¿Cómo se llama? The clean houses and clean buildings.
Like a custodian, janitor?
Custodians, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Word. That big word escapes me.
Right.
I've known custodians who have been very intelligent, more than some of my colleagues, in the academy. Saben lo que está pasando, man, and they have arguments that are very good arguments.
So we've got another comment from Ventura College's Marian Carrasco Nungaray. Thank you for joining us, Marian. She says, nice to hear from Professor Dr. Carlos Muñoz, who was actively involved with us Mecha students at UC Berkeley when I attended in the 80s. I miss meeting at the Chicano house and having Alex Zaragoza work closely with us students. Thank you for that shout out. So we have a couple of, and Professor, just to point this out, you're really blowing up the chat. Everyone's loving this. They're having a great time. I know it's kind of hard in this format because we can't really see people.
I know. Yeah.
It's much better when you're in person, but I assure you, you've got people on the edge of their seats. So we've got Professor Rubicela Gamboa from Ventura College. Again, she's asking this question. She says, when you came out on the Chicano PBS series, you talked about finding your records with the FBI. Have you continued to be surveillanced, and were there any other threats after that recording?
Yes, I think that the surveillance continues. We don't no longer have the COINTELPRO probe, the counterintelligence program of the FBI, but we got surveillance. And yes, I think I'm still under surveillance. I mean, no doubt about it. And I don't care. I mean, I have nothing to fear. Who said that? Nothing to fear but fear itself. It was not a socialist. It was a Democrat. I think it was FDR, right? So no, I fear. I don't fear death. I don't fear, any harm. I mean, I know as an indigenous man, I know that life and death is life. I mean, it's the same thing. We're part of that. We all are born. We all die.
Yeah.
So our time comes up to die. I'm hoping it can get to 100, but I'm not sure.
I love it, man. I mean, and I love that point that you made. You know, I may be under surveillance still, but I don't care. And I believe it might have been Winston Churchill who said, "There's nothing to fear but fear itself."
Yes.
Yeah, but I know that Churchill and FDR were homies, so you know it's close. So we've got a question from James Shook from Oxnard College. Thank you, James. So here's what he has to ask. I understand Robert Kennedy visited with the organizers of the 68 walkouts, and you mentioned working with Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta and Delano. Can you please talk about your impressions of these three leaders? How should young people today go about collaborating with or taking on leaders?
Well, I think it depends on what kind of leader they are. I put Cesar and Dolores in a whole different place than I do Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy in particular, are all politicians in particular. I mean, there are some real good politicians once in a while, but you know, Bobby Kennedy, I hate to tell you this if you happen to be a fan of Kennedy, you know, when we were in prison after the walkouts, some of our followers approached Bobby Kennedy for help. And his reply was to them, I don't get involved in local issues. And he was running for president. Can you imagine that? So no, he's not a good guy in my book, okay? Not to mention what he did after he became Attorney General and you know, done a lot of bad stuff overall. He was a handsome guy, charismatic, like his brother John. They, you know, did some good here and there, reforms. So you got to give him credit too. But even John F. Kennedy, my God, when I was in Army intelligence in the Far East about the Vietnam situation, I found out that Kennedy had authorized a secret war in Vietnam. He authorized the sending of so-called military advisors, you know, to Vietnam, but they were troops, you know, to engage in fighting the North Vietnamese. So I think there's a lot of you got to start to kind of think. Of course, getting back to Bobby Kennedy, my dad, what really disgusted me was that after he you know didn't want to help us, he goes ahead and stands by with kids, high school kids, who had walked out, and for a photo, what do you call it, you know, shot, photo image. And it was circulated everywhere. Man, this guy's a good guy. He came and sat down or stood up and sat, you know, next to walkout kids, and man, they all loved him, right? You know, because he was so charismatic. But no se ponen a pensar, you know, this is a problem with politicians. You know, they make a lot of promises. They sound good. They mean well. A lot of times, you got to give them credit. They mean well, but the system they're part of is corrupt. You know,
We have a group of youngsters they're coming up, and they're showing so much amazing leadership.
Yeah.
And we're hoping to see them become the politicians of the future, as opposed to like this old guard, you know, that follows certain rules or whatever. And with that being said, we have a student from Moore Park College, Gerald Richardson III, doing great work out there. He asks, Dr. Munoz, I am loving this webinar. Thank you. My question is, do you think colorism, for example, like the whole güero and güera thing, right? Do you think colorism still plays a role today in the community? And if so, why do you think it persists? Great question, Gerald. Thank you for that.
Oh, very good question. And unfortunately, a bad answer I got to give. Not a bad answer, but the reality is that, yeah, it still continues. It's part of the colonized mind, even in Mexico, you know, even amongst our own families, you know. El más prieto is not as well thought of as un güero, you know what I mean? And you find, for example, the presidents and big time politicians are usually more güero than more prieto, you know? And so that's another piece of evidence. But even amongst families, if a baby's born who happens to be güero, oh, qué bonita, güera, oh my God. And un prietito, oh, wow, bueno, pues pobrecito, pero it's okay too. You know what I mean? No tienen el mismo sentido, you know what I mean? So yeah, it continues. It has to do with the colonized mind, and it creates a problem for those of us who spend a lot of our years in life trying to break it and create coalitions with Black folks, you know what I mean? And they're out there, in the community right now, and they're very, very, very anti-Black. And once in a while, I can understand. For example, some immigrants, Mexican immigrants, are attacked by Black kids, whatever. But that's only once in a great while. And also, our own brown kids do the same thing. You know what I mean? They're putting up inside. So there is that particular, racist thing. So we got to call it what it is. And they got to be educated. I think it's a question of education. One of the ways that I've been approaching it when I was organizing out in the community is to tell folks, hey, you know what? Did you know that we have African roots too? No, no es posible. Sí, claro, I would have got a little bit of history there, about the African slaves coming to Mexico way back when. And that we do have a lot of Black and brown connections, more than one. In my own family, I said, one of my sons married an African-American beautiful woman, and I have Black and brown grandchildren, and they call themselves Blaxicans, because they're proud of being Black and brown. And I always tell people, love transcends borders, you know what I'm saying? And people fall in love, they could be pink polka dot and the other person could be otherwise, still fall in love and get married, you know what I mean? Have babies. So the point is that yeah, it's so bad, it happens, but we should not let us affect us negatively, because instead of doing that, we got to act. We have to begin to take on that particular mentality in a nice way, in a friendly way, positive way. Say, look, I understand your feelings about that, but we have to learn that we're connected. Tenemos conexiones históricas y tenemos conexiones hoy. And it's all good. There's good Black, brown folks out there, man, I'm proud to see that my family who are Black and brown. I mean, I just am very proud. And I always, as a parent and a grandparent now, and a great grandfather now, I go out of my way to teach the children that, you know what, they're talking about diversity. You can talk about diversity, but to do it is a whole different level. It's much more beautiful, something that you have friends from all walks of life, our own children, we welcomed kids to our house who were not just Latino, Mexican, we were Black, they were Native American, they were Mediterranean, they all came home and they play in our backyard and play basketball, set up a basketball court, and very, very fun loving kids, and they're still friends today, So I'm really proud that we raised our children in that way to respect differences of opinion, of course, but the differences more so of color and that kind of stuff,
Also, unfortunately, a lot of individuals, a lot of folks don't know the work that the Black and brown communities have done together in the past. I think that there is an active effort out there to keep us uneducated, to keep us divided, right? Because all throughout the civil rights movement, we saw Black and brown and our Asian American and First Nations folks coming together to fight oppression, but we're not taught that in schools because the people in power want to give us this idea that we're all separate and we hate each other. But it's like, no, we've been working together for decades. In fact, I've got a bit of a quick book recommendation here, Spaces of Conflict, Sounds of Solidarity. I don't know if you can see that because of the Zoom thing, but written by Gay Teresa Johnson, where she talks about Black and brown coalitions working together. Yeah, it's a good one. So again, Spaces of Conflict, Sounds of Solidarity by Gay Teresa Johnson. Talks about these Black and brown coalitions in Los Angeles. And so speaking of books, we do have a question from an audience member, employee at tutor at Oxnard College, Randall Searcy. He asks, he noticed the books behind you and he asks, what book is on your nightstand this day? What have you been reading lately?
Well, you know what? I got so many books that I forget which one I already read. I got different kinds of books, but the books that I get nowadays, it has to do with strategies for today and stories, inspiration, people haven't gone through stuff that they survived, you know what I mean? It kind of makes you feel good. I stay away from a lot of stuff that I used to read, that purely academic stuff. You know, it turns me off with all due respect to my academic colleagues. I mean, unfortunately, the institution of higher education has been one of the worst institutions in history, from the point of view that out of the ranks of these academic institutions like universities have come the advisors and the counselors and the people that are relied upon by politicians to put together legislation. You know what I'm saying? And unfortunately, historically, that has come to be quote, writing history from the winning side, right? And so this is why ethnic studies, why I committed myself to the development of Chicano and ethnic studies, is because I think it's important to not only for knowledge's sake, but to do the kind of things that have to be done, like you were talking about now, you know, building coalitions and working together, seeing the connections, you know, and so forth. And so this is why I get into the question of someone asked earlier about ethnic studies. Ethnic studies, I argue, ethnic studies today is more important than it was in the 60s when we started it. You know what I'm saying? We really need ethnic studies, not just in the university, but we need ethnic studies in the schools, in public schools. And it's really ridiculous to have to go through 50 years plus before finally there being the state of education saying, yeah, we're going to have ethnic studies, but then it's going to be voluntary. It's not going to be required. I mean, you can have a teacher have the audacity to teach about ethnic studies, some kind of a experience of people of color, and that's it. It's voluntary. It's not required for the students to take that class, right? So it's going to be interesting to see what's going to happen down the road with that particular situation. But yes, I think that we do need it very desperately.
Right, and so that's actually a perfect segue to our next question. We have audience member Constina Baylor. Mm-hmm. She asks, I'm sorry, I'm having a little issue on my screen. So she asks, well, earlier she said, thank you for your comments about Black and Brown coalition. She really appreciated that. And she also asks, I don't know that ethnic studies will do enough to address decolonization of the mind, inequities, or injustices. What are your thoughts about that? Thank you for that question, Constina. Profe, what do you say about that?
Well, I think she's got a good point, and that is to say that yeah, it's not the answer by all means, the only answer to the situation that exists. I do think that it does a hell of a lot positive, a lot that would be useful in terms of people developing decolonized minds. But by the same token, you cannot rely on ethnic studies only. What has to be done, and what I tried to do at Berkeley, for example, was to kind of connect with the traditional departments, in the sense that don't rely on us only. You all can do some of the same things. You can put together, create courses in sociology, for example, that are ethnic studies, in nature. You know what I'm saying? Without calling it ethnic studies, to teach about those kinds of issues that we deal with. In some colleagues in those departments have done that over the years. There's been a lot of big improvement, by the way, in the history department and ethnic economics is not kind of backward economics, but sociology, history, and anthropology también. I'm very pleased with some of the colleagues of mine in those departments. So we branched out. I always advocated a leadership at Berkeley and elsewhere in higher education to work together with white colleagues and especially Black colleagues. You know what I mean? That we're not islands unto ourselves. But we teach, what we teach can be useful across the board. I'm really, one of the things I'm proud of my Youth Identity Power book is that it's being used in sociology and history departments, not only at Berkeley, but elsewhere by white colleagues. That's pretty cool. So I always had that advanced in this. I never had an isolationist perspective. I think it's not a good one. It's counterproductive. You know what I mean? We have to be part of the world out there. Not only do we have to be better citizens in the US, but we have to be better citizens of the world. And we have to be able to connect with oppressed peoples all over the world,
Yes, thank you for that. Just a quick reminder. So we have about 15 minutes to go.
Sure.
To all of our attendees, we do ask if you're able to please check out the link in the chat for the survey that we have. We'd like to know, we'd like to receive some feedback from you to see how you feel about these presentations. So you will be entered to win a gift card from Amazon for $20 if you fill out that survey. So we do appreciate it. Professor Munoz, we have another comment and question from Randall Searcy from Oxnard College. He says, "We are so deeply honored, Dr. Munoz. You have been through so many crucibles in your life. I am wondering, when you hit the wall, so for example, when you felt self-doubt, when you felt overwhelmed as an activist, and a lot of us do, right? When we feel like the enemy is so big and so hard to defeat." So he asks, what was your self-talk? In other words, what did you say to yourself? What helped you regain your strength in that moment at that time?
Good question.
Yeah.
Well, it hasn't been easy, like everybody else, there are times that I get depressed when things are so bad. And it kind of hits me, gee, wow, man, what else do we have to do to improve on this situation? But what happens with me is what I preach and what I teach about, or have taught about all my career in teaching. And that is that in the midst of the storm, life is beautiful, okay? If you keep that in mind, no matter how bad things get, hey, man, I'm alive, thank God. As in my case, as I get older, I thank God every day. Well, thank you for keeping me another day, And I love Mother Nature. I mean, she really inspires me, you know what I mean? And we're very fortunate to live nearby a beautiful area of Mother Nature. A lot of trees, a lot of greenery and butter and flowers, And, my wife does a great job on our backyard. You should see the kind of backyard we've got. It's a beautiful, beautiful, garden. So I meditate. I meditate when things are really bad. I go outside in the patio and look out there and say, man, I'm alive. I'm blessed to have this, That shit's going on out there, but I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to go there. Let it be. Let it be. I acknowledge it. I'll do something about it down the road. But hey, right now I'm going to enjoy life, and I do that also with my family. I'm very blessed to not only have my wife, partner, and it's the partner in crime, in quote, but she's incredible. I am so blessed to have her as my love, and she's my soul, so I'm very blessed. I look at her and say, wow, man, I got no problems, this bad shit going on. Plus my children, my grandchildren, my God, it's just a joy to have them around. I have a real bad day. I call one of my sons, hey, bring your kids over and visit, it's a barbecue, So I find joy in that kind of reality, that is there. So it's like, like I said, in the midst of the storm, life is beautiful. We can never forget that. Keep that in mind and enjoy Mother Earth, enjoy your families, enjoy your loved ones. You know what I'm saying? We got a lot to live for.
It sounds like, yes, no, that's a very good point. Basically, find something that will ground you.
Yeah.
Right? Because, a lot of times during these struggles, we feel like the problems and the challenges are so immense that we feel like giving up. But like you say, just look around you. Like the inspiration, the motivation is right there, right?
Exactly.
So a couple more. We want to get as many of these questions and comments as possible. Yeah. So Yassine Woodall, and I'm sorry if I didn't get the pronunciation correct. They point out, thank you so much, Dr. Munoz, for your life's dedication to the struggles of people of color. And they even gave you a fist bump right there. So there you go. And we've got, let me see, another question from Chris Hernandez. So he asks, Dr. Munoz, is there a difference in influence in today's media than back in your time as a college student?
Wow, another good question. Unfortunately, no. I think the mass media has been not too good overall in my generation and this one, your generation. You got to keep in mind the reason for that is that big media news, for example, stations and all that are owned by corporations, by the 1%, by the wealthy. So the news is whenever you report it, they underscore, unfortunately, the negative, the murders, and all the violence, and once in a while, a news station will have the audacity to cover a good story, a nice story. You know what I mean? And I always say to myself, damn, I can't believe it. They're talking about something positive, you know, that somebody did something positive. Somebody helped another person. You know, there was kindness out there. They were showing kindness as opposed to another mass murder and all that. And they spent time and time on that kind of stuff as opposed to the positive stuff, the good that people represent out there. And one of the things in my travels and organizing and all that has been the fact that no matter where I've been, yes, I've met hostility from the right wing, hostility from those who want me to go where I came from. You know, I still get those shots. Go back to Mexico. Go back to where you came from. Hey, man, I was born here. You know, I can't go back. I'm here at home. But the point is that I think you have to be able to roll with the punches. You know, in that regard. And continue doing what you think is right.
Yes, thank you. I mean, there's so much media out there and so many different angles, right? It seems like every single perspective is offered as fact, and people have a hard time,
exactly,
you know, sifting through the fact and the fiction. So actually, now this is not so much a question, but more of a comment. So Ashley Flores points out, academic books and theory is important to the end goal, but they also feel like there's a large amount of content being thrown at us. Do you ever feel that way, Professor, where there's just so much content out there that we don't know who to pay attention to, what to listen to?
Yeah,
like books and theories and articles and documentaries, you know?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a good comment. I think it's reality. Unfortunately, that you know, it's this the way it is. Commercials, my God! I mean, one time I counted when I was watching the news. I counted commercials in between. I swear to God, I'm not exaggerating. There was much more time spent on commercials than on the actual content of the news. You know, whether it be bad or good. That's the reality of the corporate media. You know. This is why I like Democracy Now! I don't know if some of you watch Democracy Now! And it's I think it's PBS or something like that, or Link TV. I love Democracy Now! Because they're talking about the real issues, you know. They don't spend time with commercials, you know. So we need more of those kind of news hours times than what we have. But the thing is about it, yeah, media is biased. We're very biased. It's like the party system, you know, it's the Democrats and Republicans. The media is full of them, you know what I'm saying? The people who run the stations are either Democrat or Republican, you know what I mean? You don't find too many independents, I don't think, in there.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you brought up Democracy Now! They were actually just this morning I was watching it, and they were talking about Standing Rock, and I kind of thought about it for a second. I'm like, you know, no other major corporation or corporate news is talking about Standing Rock, because the corporate media is all about what's hot right now, right? And then they kind of forget about the issue, and so we collectively forget about it. So nobody's really talking about Flint, Michigan, for example. The water's still bad there, right? Nobody's talking about the pipeline in Standing Rock, because people feel like, oh, well, that's old news. Yes, but it's still current. It's still important, right? So we have another question. This is from our Ventura College librarian, Peter Setzi. Thank you for this. He asks, did you ever work with or have interactions with Fred Ross?
Oh, yes. I knew Fred Ross. I think he's passed, right? Yeah, Fred Ross was an incredible person. I mean, since a child, he's profited from knowing Fred Ross. He taught him a lot of stuff in terms of organizing, you know, and he spent a lot of time in East LA for a while, organizing CSO, other community organizations, and very good guy. And unfortunately, I didn't get acquainted to the extent that we became good friends, but we knew each other, and I respected him a lot.
So we're going to still wait for a couple more questions to trickle in if we have any. But in the meantime, I am curious, you know, as someone who's part of history and who have seen so much unfold in this country, what would you say is your prediction for our society, say in the next 10 to 20 years? What do you foresee happening?
That's a tough one. Matter of fact, I'm working on my last chapter of the autobiography. Well, in terms of what I believe will happen and what should not happen and what should happen, my thoughts on that. I think that it's really kind of difficult to deal with that because there's so many things out there going on that are hard to deal with, you know. At the same time, that you want to be able to get a handle on it, and then be able to say, okay, well, I think we should do this, and this will work. We don't know about what works. You know, we in the 60s, you know, we just tried everything. You know, see what works, it doesn't work. On the job training, in quote. And there's nothing, no academic course, no graduate PhD or whatever is going to give you the tools necessary to make a change, a fundamental restructuring of the society that needs to be done. And so my hope is that down the road, as I think they mentioned earlier, the inspiration I get from the young people today, and my God, you know, one of my heroes, well, she's a hero actually, is AOC, you know, Alejandra,
Alejandra Ocasio-Cortez.
Thank you, Cortez.
Yes.
Yeah, there goes my memory, age memory. But I love her. Oh my God, she is so courageous. You know, there's never been a congressperson, I mean, that has had the audacity to take on not only the issues as a congressperson, a congresswoman, but to take on her colleagues. You know, say, hey, man, you know, just think. You know what I mean? And I think that there's a future in her and the others that work with her.
Yes.
Four, I think, are called right now.
Right.
And others, my fantasy, by the way, if there is one, but down the road, is that the people like them, Gang of Four, the more progressive, the really left side of the spectrum, are going to get together and create a new party. I think we need a new party, a people's party. Ideally, yes, socialist party would be great, but it's not going to happen because it's such a negative tone to socialism that will remain there forever, unfortunately. But we got to have something, a new party is going to come up and emerge and take on the two-party dictatorship where they can take control, some control of the Congress. Ideally, beyond that, I have always advocated that we stop the change the system we got now, that we go back to the parliamentary system in Europe, for example. A parliamentary system that allows more diversity of thought, more different groups and they get involved with the actual deciding, making decisions. You know what I mean? And I don't think they have a president; they have prime minister, right?
Yes, correct.
You can get rid of that guy or woman overnight if she or he, you know, screws up, right? I mean, that's something really bad. Wow, let's get this person out, you know. And here we're stuck for 4 years, whether we like it or not. And or more, you know, 4 years or more. But you know, but even the most progressive in quote presidents we've had, like Obama, for example, you know, I mean, people love Obama. You know, I love her wife and her kids. You know, I don't know about him. I mean, I think he was really bad news in many ways. I was hoping that he would be at least another FDR when he took office. But my God, when he took office as president, he had the whole Congress on there. There was a Democratic Party Congress, man, you know, and he could have done a lot of good. Instead, what did he do? Well, he saved the corporations, you know, whether there was an economic downturn, and he saved the working class. He didn't pay attention to. There were more black and brown people hurt during his presidency, especially men, the black men and brown men, who wound up more in prison than ever. He has incarcerated more undocumented people than any other president, you know, including Trump. And so, you know, it's what he did, you know, and also, not to mention war. I mean, he never got stopped any war that was going on in his presidency, but he added to the war. So he did a lot of bad stuff, you know, and it's hard for me to think highly of him. But I do acknowledge that he was a brilliant mind, incredible young man, and his wife in particular. My God, it was so nice when he took office way back when. To see him come out with his family, you know, his black family, and the first time in history that happens, you know, that was so wonderful to see that. And I was very hopeful, but unfortunately, you know, no pasó. I mean, he did some good stuff here and there, you know, but